The radio crackled with tension. "Any friendly aircraft? Do you copy?" "This is SEAL Team 6. We're surrounded by close to 200 enemies. Their ammo was nearly depleted. Wounds were piling up. If close air support didn't arrive immediately, they were done for." Major Rachel Morgan was gliding at 40,000 feet above a restricted sector when the desperate call cut through. A glance at her instruments showed she had barely 12 minutes of fuel remaining. Beneath her, a treacherous canyon loomed, where even the smallest error meant colliding with the mountainside. Yet a dozen Navy SEALs were on the verge of being overrun unless someone attempted the unthinkable. Rachel shoved her control stick forward, plunging into the fight. Her GAU-8 Avenger cannon sat primed with 1,174 armor-piercing rounds. What unfolded during the next 8 minutes would become a case study in military academies for years to come. This is Major Rachel Morgan, 28 years old, 5'6", lean and athletic, sandy blonde hair neatly tucked per regulations, and green eyes sharp enough to track targets at heights that unnerved most pilots. She had already shown what she was capable of. Rachel had piloted the A-10 Thunderbolt II, better known as the Warthog, for 6 years, amassing over 800 combat hours on 3 covert deployments to regions absent from official maps. Anyone who found themselves beneath its gun barrels knew to fear the aircraft. The jet itself was practically designed around its monstrous 7-barrel GAU-8 rotary cannon, hurling depleted uranium shells at a staggering 3,900 rounds per minute. Engines, armor plating, and wings were all there for one purpose: to deliver that gun into battle. And Rachel Morgan was among the most skilled Warthog pilots in service. She was running a standard patrol above merciless mountains in an unnamed sector, watching over ground forces striking entrenched positions. The landscape below was carved with jagged ridges and steep ravines, so remote that even top-secret charts marked it as unexplored. It was her 3rd mission that day, and her fuel was nearly tapped when the urgent plea cut through. "Any aircraft, any aircraft. This is SEAL Team 6. Call sign Trident 1-1. We are boxed in by 200 hostiles, coordinates withheld. We've got wounded, ammo nearly gone, and we need close air support now. Repeat, immediate CAS or we're finished." Though steady, the voice carried a heavy weight, the tone of warriors who had faced death many times before. Yet the background chaos bled through, gunfire rattling, blasts erupting, men barking directions and casualty counts. Rachel glanced at her gauges. 12 minutes to bingo fuel, the absolute cutoff before she'd risk falling out of the sky over enemy territory. Their grid was 40 miles northeast, across terrain so brutal most aviators refused to fly near it. For her A-10, that meant 4 minutes of flying time, leaving 8 minutes to alter the fate of 12 SEALs, either bringing them out alive or leaving them behind forever. "Trident 1-1, this is Hog 2-7, Rachel's voice broke across the net. "I read your request for close air support. I'm 4 minutes away. Give me your status." The reply snapped back quickly, relief obvious even under clipped radio discipline. "Hog 2-7, Trident. 1-1, we're trapped in a narrow canyon, roughly 200 meters long and 50 across. Enemy fighters pressing from the east, west, and south. The north wall is sealed by a sheer cliff. We count 200 shooters armed with RPGs and 50 caliber guns. 4 men down, 2 of them in critical shape. Ammunition nearly spent. Less than 100 rounds left." Rachel's mind was already racing, calculating options and shaping a plan. A narrow canyon meant her Warthog would have almost no room to maneuver. With hostile fire coming from 3 sides, she'd need multiple attack passes from different angles, and facing 200 fighters with heavy weapons, it would be the most dangerous flying of her career. "Copy that, Trident 1-1. Can you throw a marker? Affirmative. Hog, 2-7. Orange smoke deploying in 3, 2, 1, mark. Rachel dropped from 40,000 feet to 20, eyes sweeping the ground below. It was unlike anything she'd flown over before. Mountains towering like fortress walls, valleys twisting like serpents, and stone ridges forming natural citadels. This was terrain that swallowed armies whole and left nothing behind. Then she caught sight of it. A thin wisp of orange smoke curling from a valley so tight it looked impossible even from altitude, wedged between peaks barely noted on any map. She switched over to the Air Operations Center channel. Ares Control, Hog 27 here, responding to friendlies in contact inside an uncharted valley grid. Request clearance for danger close fire support. Hog 27, Ares Control, copy. That valley's uncharted and extremely hazardous. You are cleared hot, but use maximum caution. Fuel at bingo in 12 minutes, finish quick. Roger that, Ares, diving in. Rachel shoved the nose down, her A-10 steady and built for resilience, not glamour. She armed the GAU-8, toggled to armor-piercing incendiary, and aligned for her run. At 12,000 feet, the valley spread into view, and it was even worse than she had pictured. Barely 50 meters across, sheer cliffs rising hundreds of feet, a labyrinth of spires, hidden ravines, and sudden drops that made conventional attack runs suicidal. Enemy fighters were entrenched along the ridges, unleashing torrents of fire on the trapped SEALs below. They had chosen the ground perfectly, a natural kill box where escape was hopeless and reinforcements nearly unthinkable. Trident 1-1, Hog 2-7, visual on your smoke. Stay as low and covered as you can. I'll hit the east ridge first. Copy, Hog 2-7. We're flat on the ground. You're cleared hot. Rachel steadied her sights on the eastern ridge where muzzle flashes lit the rock. The approach was merciless. Jagged stone spires stabbed skyward like nature's own defenses. She threaded the A-10 between them, knowing a mistake of just a few feet would shear her wings off. Her altimeter plummeted, 8,000, 6,000, 4,000, dropping lower than most pilots would ever dare. Rachel's grip remained firm on the stick, eyes scanning every hazard, mind breaking down distances with machine-like precision. At 2,000 feet, she squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 erupted, its guttural roar rolling through the canyon, the very sound ground troops prayed to hear. Each passing second hurled 65 massive shells, racing downrange at over 3,500 feet per second. The eastern ridge lit up as uranium rounds tore through stone, weapons and fighters without mercy. For 3 solid seconds, 195 rounds, she reduced a 100-meter stretch to nothing but ruin. Rocks shattered, guns disappeared, and enemy positions vanished under the storm. Rachel yanked the stick back, the Warthog groaning under crushing G-forces as she climbed and swung left for another pass. A jagged spire tore past her wingtip so close she could see the fractures etched across its surface. Hog 2-7. Trident 1-1 here. Direct hits on the eastern ridge, enemy lines collapsing on that side. Can you shift fire to the west? Roger that. Trident swinging around now. Rachel rolled the A-10 into a hard bank, nose cutting toward the western ridge for the next strike. This run would be worse. The SEALS position and the terrain gave her almost nothing to work with. Towering stone columns rose like barricades, forcing her into a slalom course just to line up a shot. She dropped lower, weaving between pillars that looked designed to rip wings clean off. At 1,500 feet, she found a clear angle on the western ridge and fired. Another burst, 3 seconds, 195 shells, slammed into entrenched fighters. Through her canopy, she saw the chain reaction. Ammunition caches detonated, fuel went up in flames, and the ridge erupted into fire and flying metal. Direct hit, Hog. You've knocked out their heavy guns on the west, but most of them are concentrated on the southern ridge. Rachel wasn't done yet. Only one stronghold remained. The southern slope, where the bulk of the fighters sheltered in a maze of rock that seemed built to resist destruction. This was going to be the deadliest run of all. She would have to drop even lower, threading her Warthog through terrain designed to kill aircraft outright. Trident 1-1. I've got 5 minutes of fuel left. One more strike on the south ridge, then I'm forced to RTB. Make it count. Roger. Hog. The south side is their fortress. Break them there and we'll push out. Rachel came in from the north this time, diving into the canyon itself instead of attacking from above. It was pure insanity. 350 knots through a gorge barely wide enough for her wings, rock walls closing in like sharpened teeth. The valley twisted violently, forcing her into a hard left, then a right, then another sharp turn. Her altitude alarm screamed non-stop as she dropped below 500 feet, the red line for terrain this unforgiving. Sheared stone cliffs whipped past so close she could make out every jagged scar, but this was exactly what the SEALS needed, and Rachel Morgan delivered. Then she spotted it, a slit in the ridge just wide enough for her jet. One shot. Rachel lined it up, slipped through with only feet to spare, and yanked sharp just as the southern ridge filled her view. Fighters waited, ready to pour fire down into the canyon, but none of them expected an A-10 to surge up from below at 400 knots. Rachel leveled out, nose locked on target, and pressed the trigger. 3 bursts, 3 seconds each. Almost 600 rounds unleashed in fury. Every shell tore into the enemy, ripping bunkers, shredding fighters, and reducing defenses to rubble. The south ridge vanished under raw firepower. Vehicles detonated in blinding fireballs, hurling debris across the valley floor. Rachel hauled the Warthog out with less than 100 feet to spare. Alarms shrieking about terrain, fuel, and a dozen other crises born from that reckless run. She had just flown a gauntlet the manuals called unsurvivable, landing the strike that turned an impossible battle. Trident 1-1, Hog 2-7, Winchester on the gun, Bingo on fuel. I'm breaking off. Can you move? Relief surged back through the static. Hog 2-7, you just saved 12 lives, the enemy's falling back. We're moving now. Thank you doesn't even cover it. Stay sharp, Trident. Hog 2-7, RTB. Rachel pulled for altitude, angling back toward base with her fuel gauge barely offering enough to limp home if everything held. Her hands stayed steady on the stick, though her chest pounded with adrenaline after flying the most dangerous run of her life through terrain no one was supposed to survive. Have you ever done something that terrified you beyond measure? Knowing failure meant others would die. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being scared to death and pressing forward anyway. Rachel touched down at the classified forward strip with less than 2 minutes of fuel remaining. As she taxied into her slot, a crowd gathered, stunned that this looked like an ordinary patrol return. But when she climbed from the cockpit, she understood why. Colonel Diane Mercer stood waiting with officers and nearly the entire maintenance crew. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Cole Ramirez, stared at the jet as though it had cheated physics. Major Morgan, I need to inspect this airframe immediately. Radio chatter said you flew through terrain that should have torn the wings off. The A-10's built tough, Sergeant, Rachel replied. Ma'am, with respect, this jet was designed to take hits, not to weave through stone canyons at 400 knots. We'll need a full structural inspection. Colonel Diane Mercer stepped forward, a mix of admiration and unease in her tone. Major Morgan, That's some of the most daring flying I've ever heard. You just pulled a SEAL team out with maneuvers that would make test pilots nervous." "Thank you, ma'am. Just doing my duty." "That was far more than duty, Major. Dropping into that uncharted valley at those altitudes. That's the sort of flying that either wins medals or wrecks careers. Yours may end up being both." For the next hour, Rachel endured the debrief. Intel officers wanted every detail: altitude, approach angles, navigation, enemy placements, damage reports. Her targeting pod footage was already being analyzed, and seasoned aviators shook their heads in disbelief. "Initial estimates show you eliminated about 150 fighters during those runs," the intel officer noted. "Survivors scattered into the mountains, which let the SEALs break contact without further losses beyond the first casualties." "The wounded, what's their condition?" Rachel asked. "Medivac lifted them out 30 minutes after you cleared. Both criticals are stable, expected to survive. All 12 SEALs are alive because of what you pulled off." That evening, Rachel sat alone in the ready room, writing her after-action report and still trying to grasp the scale of what she had done when the door opened. 12 men in combat gear walked in, led by a Navy SEAL commander who looked like he'd just crawled out of a battlefield. "Major Morgan," he said. Rachel stood. "That's me. Lieutenant Commander Jack Rourke, SEAL Team 6. My men wanted to meet the pilot who dragged us out of hell today." The 12 SEALs filled the room, and for the first time, Rachel felt small in the presence of warriors like them. But Rourke stepped forward, offering a hand with a respect that ignored rank and service branch. "We were on the net while you made those runs," he said. "We heard you flying that canyon at 500 feet, threading through rock spires we couldn't even see from below. It was the wildest, boldest, most breathtaking flying any of us have ever witnessed. You pushed an A-10 through terrain that destroys helicopters and lived to save us." Another SEAL stepped closer, his tape reading Torres. "Ma'am, we've worked with every kind of pilot. Fast movers, rotorcraft, drones. But no one's ever flown the way you did today. You didn't just provide fire support. You became part of the team, sharing our risks." "The Warthog's designed for missions like this," Rachel said modestly. "Close air support, danger close, troops under fire. That's its job. The jet may be built for it." Rourke nodded. "But it takes a rare kind of pilot to actually dive into terrain like that. Most would have stayed high where it was safe. You came down into the valley with us. You put yourself in the same danger we faced." Another SEAL spoke. His tape marked Maddox. "Ma'am, when that ambush hit, we believed it was the end. 200 fighters, a perfect kill box, no escape. We had already made peace with dying there. Then your voice came over the radio, and suddenly we had hope. When your cannon thundered, we knew we were going home. You were trapped in that nightmare because of the mission," Rachel said. "I wasn't going to leave you to face it alone." Rourke reached into his vest and pulled out a SEAL trident pin, the emblem of naval special warfare, one of the most respected symbols in existence. "This is from my team. We want you to have it. You earned it today." "I can't accept that," Rachel said softly. "I'm not a SEAL. I never went through Bud/S or paid for it the way you all did." "No," Rourke said firmly. "But you saved SEALs when no one else could. You flew through a death trap that should have destroyed you, just to bring us home. That makes you one of us. That makes you family. Take it." Rachel accepted the pin, her hands trembling slightly. In the world of special operations, respect from SEALs was the highest honor anyone outside their ranks could ever receive. The trident wasn't just a piece of metal. It symbolized brotherhood, sacrifice, and bonds forged only in combat. "Thank you," she whispered, for trusting me to bring you home. Thank you for being insane enough and skilled enough to actually pull it off." Rourke grinned. "And the team decided, you've earned a call sign. We're calling you Valkyrie, the one who decides who lives and who dies in battle." "Valkyrie," Rachel repeated softly, testing the name. "Fitz," Torres added. "You dropped out of the sky like a legend and chose life for us instead of death." That's exactly what Valkyries do. 3 days later, Rachel was summoned to Colonel Diane Mercer's office. She assumed it was another debrief, or maybe paperwork tied to the mission and the inspection of her battered A-10. But waiting behind the desk was a 2-star general she had never seen before, General Evelyn Hart. The insignia on her uniform marked her as Air Combat Command Headquarters. Rachel snapped to attention. "Ma'am, Major Morgan, reporting as ordered." "At ease, Major. Take a seat." Rachel sat, her pulse hammering as she tried to understand what could bring a 2-star general to a forward base that wasn't even on the official map. "Major Morgan, I've reviewed the gun camera footage from your mission 3 days ago. I've read the SEAL team's report, the intelligence summary, Colonel Mercer's recommendation, and the inspection findings from your aircraft. I also consulted with several veteran A-10 and test pilots about the scenario you faced." Rachel waited, heart pounding in her chest. "The conclusion is unanimous. What you did was either the most brilliant display of close air support flying in modern history, or the most reckless violation of every safety regulation we have. The engineers who tore down your Warthog found stress fractures across the frame, proof of maneuvers far beyond its design limits. You bent that aircraft in ways it was never meant to bend. Ma'am, General Hart raised a hand. "Let me finish. You flew at altitudes and through terrain our manuals explicitly forbid. You executed maneuvers doctrine insists an A-10 cannot survive. By the book, you violated nearly 17 separate regulations and should be standing in front of a board of inquiry." Rachel's stomach tightened, but the general's tone softened. "You also saved 12 Navy SEALs from certain death. You obliterated an enemy force that believed itself untouchable in that terrain, and you displayed judgment, skill, and raw courage we strive to instill in every aviator, but almost never see executed so flawlessly under impossible odds." General Evelyn Hart rose and stepped around the desk. "Major Morgan, I'm here to inform you that you are being awarded the Air Force Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat against an armed enemy. It's the second highest decoration our service can grant, and it's being presented because your actions redefined what we believed possible." Rachel couldn't speak. The Air Force Cross was nearly legendary, reserved only for the rarest acts of valor. "You're also being promoted to Major, effective immediately," Hart continued, "and reassigned to the A-10 Weapons School at Red Rock Base, where you'll train the next generation of Warthog pilots to deliver close air support when doctrine alone isn't enough." "Thank you, ma'am," Rachel finally managed. "I don't know what else to say." "Say you'll keep flying like that when Americans need you," the general replied. "Because sometimes the mission demands more than what's safe, more than what's simple, more than what the manual says is possible. You've proven you're one of those rare pilots," Hart said. "Now, teach others to do the same." The promotion ceremony followed 2 days later. Rachel's parents flew in from the Dakota Plains, proud but still shaken after learning what their daughter had actually done. Her fellow A-10 pilots stood alongside her, joined by Colonel Diane Mercer, General Evelyn Hart, and the 12 SEALs she had saved. As Hart pinned the oak leaves of Major onto her uniform, Lieutenant Commander Jack Rourke leaned close and whispered, "Every SEAL team in theater knows your name now. They call you Valkyrie, and they know if you're overhead when it all falls apart, they're going home alive. That's one hell of a reputation." The ceremony closed with the formal reading of the Air Force Cross Citation. As the general's words recounted the mission in phrases that sounded even more impossible than Rachel remembered, the weight of it sank onto her shoulders. She hadn't only saved 12 men, she had proven that the A-10, dismissed by many as outdated, could still succeed where no other aircraft dared. She showed that close air support was never just about weapons or technology. It was about pilots willing to share the danger with the troops below. 6 months later, Major Rachel Morgan stood before a classroom of seasoned A-10 aviators at Red Rock. These were combat-tested flyers, training to become weapons officers, the elite instructors of the community. Today's subject is terrain denied close air support, Rachel began. Specifically, we'll examine a mission in an unmapped valley where a SEAL team was surrounded by 200 fighters in terrain doctrine claims fixed-wing aircraft cannot survive. She played the gun camera footage from her sortie. The class sat in silence as the video revealed the dive into that impossible canyon, the weaving between stone spires, the gun runs flown below safety altitudes, the strikes delivered within meters of friendly positions. This mission broke every standard operating rule we have, Rachel said when the screen went dark. The altitudes she flew were suicidal. The terrain should have been impassable. The distance to the friendlies shattered every safety margin. By normal analysis, it should have been a mission doomed to failure. Rachel paused, locking eyes with each student. The 12 SEALs are alive because someone attempted the impossible when it was the only option left. Your duty as A-10 pilots is to deliver close air support to troops under fire. Sometimes that means following the manual. Sometimes that means rewriting it when the old rules don't fit the fight right in front of you. A hand lifted. Ma'am, how did you know you could thread that terrain without smashing into rock? I didn't know for certain, Rachel admitted. I studied it from altitude, worked out the angles I'd need, and made the best judgment I could with the information available. Then I trusted my training, my aircraft, and my ability to adapt if something unexpected appeared. What if you'd been wrong? Another student asked. Then I'd have died, Rachel said flatly, and 12 SEALs would have died with me. But the alternative was leaving them to die while I circled safely above. That was never acceptable. A hand rose from the back. Ma'am, how do you know when to take that kind of risk? When to push past the safety lines? Rachel thought carefully before responding. You have to know 3 things with absolute certainty: your aircraft's limits, your own limits, and the tactical situation. The Warthog can do what no other aircraft can. It was built to fly low, to endure punishment, and to deliver accurate fire where nothing else can survive. But it takes a pilot who understands that and is willing to use it when lives are on the line. She brought up a tactical diagram. Let's break the mission down step by step. First run, Eastern Ridge. I came in from the west, using a rock formation as my reference for altitude and angle of attack. For the next 4 hours, Rachel dissected every moment of that fight. The class scribbled notes relentlessly, peppering her with questions about navigation, ammunition choices, radio procedures, fuel management, and the split-second decisions that separated survival from failure. But the real lesson wasn't hidden in numbers or charts. It was in the mindset. Being a Warthog pilot meant flying into places that made others turn back. Because down there, Americans were depending on you when no one else could break through. In the years that followed, Rachel became one of the most respected instructors in the history of the Air Force. Her students didn't just learn tactics. They absorbed the creed of the Warthog. Success isn't defined by safety margins. It's measured by the lives saved. In her office sat the SEAL trident Jack Rourke had given her, placed beside a photograph of 12 men who had walked away from that unmapped valley. Beneath the photo hung a line one of her students had pinned up. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else matters more than fear. 5 years after that mission, Rachel was back in combat, this time leading a flight of A-10s in support of special operations in another region that didn't officially exist on maps. The profile was familiar: troops in contact, brutal terrain, desperate cries for fire support. Valkyrie lead. This is Phantom 1-1. We're under heavy fire from elevated positions in rough ground, requesting danger, close support. Rachel scanned the valley below. Jagged cliffs, twisting rock, another battlefield designed to kill aircraft. But this time, she wasn't flying alone. 3 wingmen held formation beside her, pilots she had trained herself, men and women who had studied her impossible mission and learned what the Warthog could achieve in the hands of someone who refused to accept limits. Phantom 1-1, Valkyrie lead copies. We've got your back. Mark your position and prepare for support. And as she guided her flight into yet another canyon, the manuals declared unsurvivable. Rachel thought about the 12 SEALs she had once saved, the hundreds of students she had taught, and the legacy she carried forward. The A-10 Warthog had been called obsolete, outdated, a relic destined for retirement. But as long as American troops fought on the ground in impossible conditions, there would always be a need for pilots willing to fly into hell itself to protect them. And as long as aviators like Rachel Valkyrie Morgan were willing to push past every boundary to bring their people home, the unmistakable roar of the GAU-8 cannon would remain the sweetest sound a soldier could ever hear when death seemed certain. If you've ever had to do something that terrified you because someone's life depended on it, remember Rachel Morgan. Heroism isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and still pressing forward, because the alternative is unthinkable. The pilot, who once plunged through an unmapped canyon to save 12 SEALs, proved that the most vital element of any mission isn't written in a manual or a technical spec sheet. It's the will to become more than you believed possible when lives hang in the balance. And somewhere, deep in a valley that doesn't exist on any map, still echoes the most beautiful sound those 12 warriors ever heard: the thunder of salvation, delivered by someone who knew that some lives are worth any risk. Thanks for watching. This is Major Tom's Tales. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more incredible stories like this one.